Good morning, everyone. My name is Rebecca, and I am a system architect in MES Agile program in Novo Nordisk. We are the department that works with MES deployments, mainly PASX deployments, and we are a center of excellence in PASX. We think ourselves, at least. So I'm here to talk a little bit about our journey, about harmonization and the efforts we are putting into trying to harmonize our MBRs mainly, but also the whole solution of PASX, you can say, in our instances. We have more than 30 sites using PASX, and that is a lot. And it's a big task, so I'm really happy that you have put me here on stage as a success story. It feels like we're standing just in front of a huge task, but of course we have reached a lot of things already. You can say it is a success already because we have made internal alignment and acceptance about that we need to harmonize our processes, and that is maybe the biggest task of all. So that is a success, but of course now we need to start using the harmonized MBRs that we have created, and that is of course also a long journey that we have ahead of us. So I don't know, last year I was at the PFU in June last year, and I was attending a workshop about MBR harmonization, and it appeared that we are not the only ones who are struggling with this theme. There was a lot of other companies present at that workshop, and everybody was struggling with how do we harmonize when we have already deployed some of the PASX functionality in our sites. How do we do it even more efficiently? So I'm happy to come here and tell how we do it now in Novo Nordisk and the journey that we are embarking on now, basically. The first part of my presentation will be a little bit about the backstory of why is it that it's necessary for us to do this? Why is it that it's not just, you can say, the other industry factors as we saw yesterday about supply constraints and difficulties in delivering to market, etc. We have other pressures as well in Novo Nordisk. So I'll give you a little bit of background of that, and then I'll go into more details about how is it we're doing it, what kind of work have we been executing and doing over the last year to this. So first, a little bit about Novo Nordisk as a company. I suppose you know the company, all of you, I don't know. It's a world-leading producer of diabetes and obesity care. And that, I don't know if you follow the news, but if you do, you also know that market is not exploding, but at least it's growing quite a lot. And has been for the last few years. That, of course, puts a lot of pressure on our demand because it has been increasing like crazy. Just to give you some idea about what it is we're facing, if you look, we have, it says 55,000 employees now. Last year it was less than 50,000, and next year we will be more than 60,000. So that's a lot of people, just internal growth we have in the company. And that, of course, also increases or gives us a need to have more capacity. So there's a huge capacity expansion going on. And you can read about the numbers. I'm not really going to go into details with it, but you can read more about that in the annual report if you're interested. But it's a lot of sites we're building, basically. So just to give you an idea about the factory structure of Novo Nordisk, we have a global presence in our supply chain. We have about, I think the majority still is of our factories are in Denmark, in Copenhagen region, but we also have 4 production facilities in the US, and we have 1 in France and 1 in China, and then we have also in Brazil, and then we have a few factories that are producing only for the local market. But the majority of our sites are actually producing for the world market. So it's a huge facility. We have more than 30 PASX instances, and they are growing in numbers. Yeah. And I think this picture here is very similar to what we have seen also yesterday about the digital aspirations for a production company. We want to have, ultimately we want to go for the lights out factory. We want to automate everything. There's a lot of projects going on, having robot fleets in warehouse and trying to do everything automatically. But where you can say my department, or where the MES department is being involved mostly right now, that is in the whole digital release journey and paperless production area. That's just two of the bullets up here, but that takes a lot of energy. A lot of projects are being made to cater for this journey, basically. We have a lot of projects going on here, and that is pressure we are on. We need to work very efficiently, basically, to cater for the digital ambitions in the company. A little bit about the PASX history in Novo Nordisk. The first site installing PASX was back in the 90s. That was long before I joined the company, but over the last, 10 years or so, until 2013, and maybe a little bit later than that, more sites came on the PASX journey, but it was always with material handling as a functionality. So it was registering consumption, registering batch production basically, and registering stock creation. So it was all of these registrations going on. And then if you look now, we have more than 30 sites, and we have more than 8,000 users. And since we are on this digital journey, the aspiration about paperless production, and we need to expand our use of PASX, and we need to do basically electronic batch records. And that is the majority of the projects we are working on now. Full integration and electronic batch record. If you imagine in the timeline, like between 2008 and 2013, there was not really any ambitions about this, but a lot of sites had access to PASX at that time and had installed it, maybe not on all lines, but on many lines. And to my knowledge, at least, there was no really guidance in terms of what is best practice for integration to lines, or how do we do this. There was no guidance from central departments either, so a lot of the sites were left with a lot of creative people, you can say, and have developed into many different homemade solutions when it comes to integration to lines, for example. So it appears that we have a lot of creative people working in Novo Nordisk, which I guess is a good thing, but it also gives us a challenge now, because we have a very scattered landscape, you can say, in terms of legacy systems, in terms of legacy technology, and in terms of variations of lines and how to do things. So that is the situation we're facing now. We have all these lines and sites working in different ways. And not to mention, we are on the upgrade journey as well. We haven't started upgrading to 3.3. All our sites are working with 3.1.8 right now, but we are planning migration, we're planning upgrade. And that is, you can say, a golden opportunity for us to actually maybe trying to harmonize how we integrate, how we use the systems, and how processes should work. So, together, I hope these slides and this information gave you an idea why it is that we need to be even more efficient when we deploy PASX, when we digitalize our batch records. We are under so much strain, and we have so many expansion projects coming on. We need to work even more efficiently because we don't have more people than we have. So that's how it is. So we need to be able to deliver the same deployments with faster and with less people, basically. At the same time, we have spent a couple of years in Novo Nordisk, and that is in general in IT. We've been working in this Agile Scrum methodology. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's, I guess, most IT areas are working like this or have been the last few years, at least in Denmark. And that has proven to be very efficient in many ways. It's basically empowering teams to govern themselves, to take decisions, to move, and to develop with time. But when we have a growing number of teams working with deployments and they are self-governing, it could also end up in having as many different GMBRs as we have teams, even within the same processes. And that's not really what we want to achieve. We want to work agile and have the empowerment to decide in the teams, but we also want them to deploy a template in order to reach maximum efficiency. So that is where we are right now. I think we have more than 33 teams now. It's growing all the time, so it's a little bit difficult to keep up with the numbers. But and then we are planning migration of sites, and we have expansion projects. So, what did we do? We identified that we had an issue. And that was more or less last year. During last year, we identified that. And then we set up a task force team to define the baseline. It's difficult to change, you can say, create a template to deploy when you are deploying it. So it's like doing something when the train is moving already. So we thought we could set up a task force to at least define the template for some of the processes and then start using them when it was ready. And so that's what we did. And before that, actually, I think also important to mention is that we created an awareness in the organization about this, and we got a very clear mandate from management that harmonization is the way forward. Without that, we could not go out and deploy PASX on production sites saying, yes, we are an IT department, now we're going to decide how you're going to produce. That would never fly. But so the first step was actually to create a kind of clear mandate from management. So the task force has been working for like 6 months to define the different recipes. They have been very clear on what level is it we're trying to define here. We have always said we don't want to standardize. That's not the idea. We're trying to harmonize. And the reason we distinguish between those two terms is that we know we have a scattered landscape of different technology and different production lines. And so we have to use whatever we can within that frame, you can say. So we are not changing production lines. We're not asking sites to change technology. We have to adapt to whatever surroundings that they have. And that is what we call harmonization. So we have also, we have many different production processes in Novo Nordisk, and trying to define all of them in one go was a little too ambitious for us. So we decided a very clear scope of which production processes we wanted to define in this template and set up to do that, basically. So we know we have something that is missing, and that will come at a later point in time. So then another thing that we did that was very important, and I think it's very important if you try to do what we did, harmonizing processes across a big production area, that is to involve process groups. Now, I don't know if all companies in pharma have process group, but I assume that you have areas or people responsible for a production process. That is what we have. We have all of our different production processes are managed, you can say, by process groups that are checking that do we get a compliance signal that we need to change something in our production process? Do we need to do something different? So they are experts in the production process, but they're not necessarily experts in PASX at all, and they don't know GMBRs either. So that is a very clear gap, you can say, when you're trying to digitalize a process. the experts who know the process, they don't necessarily know the IT system, and the IT people working to deploy it, they don't necessarily know the production process. And how do you mitigate that? There's no doubt that process group people in Novo Nordisk will need to get from level 0 to level 1 or level 2 in the knowledge of PASX. I think some of them are maybe on level 1 now. It's getting better, but they're not considering themselves IT people or PASX experts or anything like that. But it's very clear that they will have to build PASX knowledge during all of this. Like MES analysts working with MBR design, they also have to understand the business. So you can say the process that they have been working on, it has been an internal design of these GMBRs, harmonized GMBRs, that has been made by our MES analysts, but they have been involved with process groups. Of course, they have been discussing with them all the time, and ultimately they got them acknowledged and approved by process groups. And that's a very important point to have them, you can say, get a stamp of approval by a process group, because they are the governing party of these processes internally. So that's really important. So the end result is like a selection of different documents that came out of this task force group. You can say most high level is like a PowerPoint visualization of how the recipe is connected, how it looks like, and then a set of guiding documents where each module is described in more detail. Maybe some input to the design documents, that the documentation we need to create. And I think next step is to also include a validation part, because right now we still need to validate all GMBRs from scratch, but in order to achieve even more efficiency, that would be to also we could pre-validate some of these recipes and only validate the delta missing part or the changes that a site would have to make locally. So that would really speed up implementation as well. And just how do you explain business people what a GMBR is? That has proven to be a very difficult task. And I think this picture here was one attempt to put it into a context that they actually understand. It's not that we have been out and presenting this slide all the time, but it sort of gives a hierarchy of how the different documents are connected. And maybe IT people don't know what the MAF is, but line of business people definitely know this. This is basically the document that is filed for authorities, and how it links to the GMBR. That is what we try to achieve here. And that actually, I would say that is maybe the biggest success we have had so far. That is to anchor this knowledge in the line of business, that how the GMBRs are connected to production processes and why we need to harmonize them across the company. I have a slide with some examples of what are the content of the harmonized recipes, harmonized GMBRs as we call them. This is one example from Formulation, where you have the building blocks of the recipe, and you have each building block is described in more detail with good advice on how to set this up. Now, Formulation is a little bit of a weird area because it's very, very, very product dependent. There's a lot of different considerations, there's a lot of details, but the collection of documentation that we have made makes it able for the MES analyst to take these slides and this information to go out and discuss, for having a point of departure that is much stronger than if they didn't have this with them. So they have a baseline now to go out and ask the right questions, and also show a site, this is how we structure a formulation recipe in Novo Nordisk. Maybe there will be changes to some of it, that's pretty sure, but we have a much better point of departure now. And that is what basically makes it much more faster, or we expect it to be much more faster to deploy a new recipe in an area like this. We have a baseline to present to site and say, this is how we do it, instead of starting from scratch and ask, how do you want to do it? There's a big difference in that. The next slide here is another example of the kind of information and documentation that was created with the task force group. I think this is pretty special for Formulation also, that it contains a lot of questions, a lot of different details that a MES analyst needs to ask in order to set up the recipes in the right way. So I'm not going to go into details with it, but it's just, you can say a harmonized recipe is, some people tend to think that it's, you know, one big recipe and then that's what we have. But it's also asking the right questions. Which questions should you ask in a formulation? Which questions should you ask in a packaging process? It's very different. So that is also what we got out here. I promised Michael to just mention that we got a lot of good advice from Körber in this process. And I think we were very thankful. I mean, we knew we needed to harmonize, but we also was sometimes we didn't really know the framework or how could we do this. And I think we got some very helpful input on structuring all of this documentation and accepting that sometimes you can maybe just harmonize half of a process and the other half is very individual for the individual site. But that was really good, so we were happy about that. And then, so how do we then use these recipes in deployments, and how are we going to how do we intend to do it? It is very, very important that we use the templates, the harmonized recipes, as a baseline for a template to go out and say to the sites, this is how we're going to do it now. And not ask, as I said before, ask how do you want to do it? This is the way our solution works. And then the site can go, they can say, well, we need to do it differently because this and this and this and this. And most of those arguments are very often connected with deviations or some historical things that happened in the past that we don't necessarily want to cater for in our recipes, because that is something that has happened in the past, and that's fine, but now we move on. Of course, we have to cater for those differences in technology, in differences in line structure, or if, you know, if there's two rooms or different, different technology, basically. That is, of course, things we have to consider. But we want to go out and use the templates, you can say, in the analysis phase, in the early phase of a project, to see what are the gaps, how much of the recipes can a site actually use. And we want to document the gaps with the site. So we have a clear agreement with the site. What is it we need to develop on top of this? What is it that you agree to use of this harmonized recipe? So that is to have a clear agreement on that. So we can use it later on when they try to say, we also want this, we say, well, you agreed to do this. So that's kind of how it will work. And then we expect that in the execution phase, where the actual deployment is going on, that will be shortened. If a site is able to use a harmonized recipe, of course, then it's more copy-paste, you can say, from an existing template. I think it will be naive to think that all sites can just do that, because there are local adaptations, there are differences in technology. So we will have to adjust a little bit, but at least we expect that it will be, I think, up to 30% faster or something like that, to do like this. And then handover, and we're done. And hopefully that will speed up our MES deployments, so we can have time also to upgrade. Yeah, so I've waited with this slide here in the very end. When I presented this to management, it's always the first slide we bring on, because they need to understand what are the benefits before they listen to anything. But I thought this would be a pretty good closing slide to say what is it we expect to get out of this. And it is to, first of all, it is to accelerate our implementations, because we have, as I said in the beginning, we have a lot of expansions, we have a lot of demand pressure, we have a big pressure to accelerate our digital journey. And in order to deliver that, we need to do it faster. It's as simple as that, basically. But also, we expect that if all sites have similar recipes, we will be able to deliver a better support afterwards. It's easier to find an error if all sites are using the same functionality, basically. And then, of course, another very important point for us is the maintenance afterwards, upgrading, getting new versions. If all sites are using the same functionalities and aspects of the solution, then we can upgrade to the next versions much easier compared to how we see it today with the very local adaptations here and there. So that is what we want to achieve with this, ensuring fast deployments and be future ready, basically. So I think that's it for me.